All right, we're live talking about Atlanta, the potential at least doubleheader today. Good morning, Andy, and the potential tripleheader tomorrow. I think obviously, it's weather, right? I get a feeling we're gonna at least be able to end the Truck Series race today, and if we race into the evening for Xfinity, I would envision we can get them both in today. But yet again, I'm in Houston. I'm not at Atlanta, oddly enough, this weekend. Last couple of years, I've had season tickets to Atlanta. Just didn't decide to do that this year. I plan on being at Atlanta in the summer. We've just, my friend groups and everything, we've decided that we're probably going to do the Coke 600 this year. So we're all traveling to Charlotte for that weekend in May. Anyway, that's just not why I'm there this weekend. I want to mention that we do have 7 days left in this month. For those of you that I assume everybody already knows, but PayDirt and TrueDFS did merge together during the NASCAR off season, and starting in the beginning of February, we were as in me, Bobby Sheets, Rody, we were all under the PayDirt flag and stuff. For those that still have a TrueDFS subscription, that site will cease operation at the end of February. So next Sunday, everybody's already been told about that and everything. I believe everybody who wanted to get a free month of PayDirt, who was a current subscriber, has already done that. If you are interested in trying PayDirt for any time period, but you get 50% off your first month if you use the code PD Welcome in the description of the YouTube videos. We're streaming here live on the PayDirt YouTube, the TrueDFS YouTube, my personal YouTube, and the PayDirt X account, which is James's account. That's probably the last week that this stuff streams to the TrueDFS YouTube channel. We're just trying to get as many people out there and know about it, know about the transition and everything like that. Past that, let's go ahead and start talking about the two races today. Now, yet again, am I building different for weather? No. Now, for those of you that are, I suppose, new to fantasy NASCAR and stuff, obviously last week is Daytona, which, what an annoying optimal lineup for the 500. Like, honestly, shame on you guys for not having that duplicated more. The fact that was literally just chalk plays, and then like Zane Smith was like truly the one-off or whatever, is crazy. Like, I hate when the chalk just goes through and smashes a slate like that, right? And normally, at Talladega and Daytona, I personally like to play the lower owned guys, okay, and not play the chalk. This week at Atlanta, we're at a racetrack that races very similar, right? We're probably going to see green flag runs, especially between these two series today. If anything, if the Xfinity series goes green all the way, we're probably going to see people run out of fuel and have to pit towards the end of the race. Tonight, but who are the good plays? What do we do? You play the chalk plays here at these races, or at this track. You play the good drivers and stuff. When we look at the starting grid for Atlanta, okay, now who are the good plays? Who are people in good equipment, good cars, whatever, right? That's pretty much people from 28th to 11th today, right? Now, obviously, if you're potentially trying to get different, potentially grab the lap leader. We've seen Kyle Busch lead a lot of laps at Atlanta. In fact, last year led a majority of the race and then won it. But we see that the teens in this race are pretty much the strongest cars, right? You have Enfinger, Eckes, Friesen, Tanner Gray, Hocevar, Lane Riggs, Corey Heim. Then you also have Ty Dillon and Justin Haley starting 25th and 26th. Brendan Queen starting 28th. I mean, those should be the core, right, that everybody uses, right? Those are the good drivers and stuff, right? And then obviously, if you're interested in trying to grab a lap leader, I would very much expect to see Garcia and Kyle Busch fight for that. We've seen Garcia lead laps here, and specifically, we see people be very, very aggressive in trying to maintain leading this race, especially when it gets single file for a bit, and we're just kind of clocking off laps and stuff. There's really nothing much more to that. I mean, I have my projections up, I have my lineups built, I have lineups that I like and stuff. It's really going to come down to what kind of value ends up working out here. We see, or at least I'm expecting to see, a lot of lineups, be near that max salary, anywhere from, for the full 50,000 to probably, 49.1, somewhere around there. That's where a majority of the lines are going to be coming from. And since we're using, so many people that are kind of similar in projected scoring, you're probably more it's probably more of a benefit to use people who are slightly lower owned in their respective starting positions and salary. What I mean by that is when we're looking at and yet again, this is still, early, kind of early, start here of my ownership projection journey, because everybody knows I've been very apprehensive on doing any of that. I just make projections and build my lineups and stuff. But when we're looking at Hocevar, Lane Riggs, Corey Heim, and Chandler Smith, identically the same play. Okay, these guys have the exact same upside, floor, whatever. Who is the least owned of these four drivers? It's Chandler Smith. I would envision that I will be probably over Chandler Smith, or over the ownership on Chandler Smith because of that. Um, I think that's probably the first big, I guess, pivot or whatever, right? I really think this race is going to come down to what Nemechek, Hemrick, Infinger, and Eckes do, from and even Friesen as well, from like what lineups actually end up competing here, because I think we're going to have a majority. I think I would not be shocked to see 4 or 5 of your optimal lineup drivers. And let me change it, because I like using winning lineup. We're trying to win. Sometimes the optimal isn't played, although today might be a good situation of that. I would envision 4 to 5 of those drivers being 12th on back. It's just going to come down to, does Garcia get there at 7,100? Does Rose get there at 76? Does Kyle Busch lead the whole time and end up trying to push out a potential 10K driver and stuff like that? I would envision, Corey Heim, Lane Riggs, probably your highest owned drivers in this event. So probably by default, Hocevar and Chandler Smith are probably guys you want to get overweight on, potentially Haley. And, I'm really not concerned about the Ram trucks. I like Mini Tyrell, for example, right? I mean, he's 6,100, in a Ram truck, right? Like, first time ever seeing any decent speed was last week. But like, I would still rather play him over like Reum, Clayton Green, right? Um, it seems to me like the only value plays that you would want to use are technically probably in the 6K range. Mini Tyrell, Daniel Dye. If I need to get into a 5K driver, I'm playing Tyler at 5,900 starting 27th. But I really don't see the need to get super duper crazy on this one, or in the Xfinity Series slate, because now we have enough data at Atlanta to just basically see that, okay, this is a obviously a plate race that, outside of instances where we do have a gigantic one, which has really only happened like twice, one at the beginning of a Cup Series race a couple years ago with Austin Dillon, and then last year's big wreck, we typically just see this kind of mirror old Daytona, to where if you were in a good car or good equipment, you could get up through the field. And if you're in a bad car and bad equipment, while you are usually very highly sought after in my lineups for Daytona and Talladega, you will most likely end up going multiple laps down in this event. Um, and the wrecks are not as beneficial to you as they are at those tracks. Also, yet again, if we see green flag pit stops, if we see anybody have a tire issue, if we see anybody get in the wall and they pit here, you're going like 4 laps down just right off the bat, right? Because you got to pit in turn 3. You basically lose a lap and a half just getting to your pit box, not even including the pit stop, right? So if you have any type of issue, you are essentially out of the race, regardless if you were actually wrecked out or not, because you're going 3 to 4 laps down. We see that a good portion of winning, or at least decent DFS days, are coming from the 27 to 14 positions at this track. On top of people starting up in the top 7 and maintaining their position in the top 7. That's why going back to this race, does Garcia and Rhodes at 71 and 78 score the same, or potentially outscore Stuart Friesen and Tanner Gray? Those are more so the pivots and 1v1s that we're kind of looking at today. on the truck race. Let me see what you guys are saying here. Then I guess we can move on to the Xfinity here. This is a fairly decent early stream. It's 9:27 here where I'm at. I'm sure it's like 10:27 on the eastern side of the country here. Not really seeing much of anything, so I'm going to move on to the Xfinity race, which I have never played Austin Hill at Atlanta through all of the races. I may have, but I just don't remember doing that because he's always been 29% owned, and just game theory says if you can see a situation, take advantage of that, don't play it. So I've actually never played Austin Hill at Atlanta, despite the fact that this guy's won like 13 of these races, right? He's starting 20th today. Okay, now the field, which is it makes me feel better, is that Kligerman and Castle and stuff kind of talk about this weekend. They're like, hey guys, you know how you beat Austin Hill? You just don't push the moron, right? Like, I literally said the exact same thing before the race on Saturday for Xfinity. Like, the field is too stupid. They're actually too stupid to just not work with the guy, because they just constantly push Jesse Love and Austin Hill in these races. Like, they just can't fathom not using that, right? And so, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, Austin Hill and Jesse Love decided to qualify 20th and 10th respectively. Those seem like the best plays on the slate. It is very likely that Austin Hill is in 7th or something on like lap 13, right? It's very likely that he's competing for the race outside of being wrecked or mechanical failure, which we have seen Austin Hill have. Sometimes at Daytona, we've seen him have overheating issues or whatever, right? But it's RCR at Atlanta. This is a home race for Austin Hill's sponsor. I mean, they literally have the Bennett Transportation fucking suite or whatever, and they bring like 10,000. They bring like all their employees to this stupid race. I think Austin Hill's, probably the best play on this slate. I will probably not go over probably 55% exposure in my stuff on Austin Hill, but it's very, very hard to not like him. It's very hard to not like Jesse Love. It's very hard to not like Allgaier. We're seeing in this race now, the only question mark is Ross Chastain. Now, he is in the 32 car, which it's not a. I'm not concerned about like what is he doing in this car. I'm just saying that the expected ownership of Austin Hill and Ross, they're both. I would envision them both to be over like 44% owned, and there is just a slight chance that something, somewhere, some case happens with Ross's car here that, like, I'm probably lower on Chastain than the expected field is, right? I think when you're building, it makes a lot of sense to have Hill and Chastain together, but I really think that I would probably rather have people like Brandon Jones, people like Ryan Sieg, Harrison Burton, Anthony Alfredo, Jeb Burton, Sanchez, even Poole. Like, I think Brendan Poole's probably the best value on the slate. He'll probably carry a ton of ownership. I just like a lot of people's upside versus Chastain in this race. I actually even really like people in the top 10 slightly more than Chastain. So there is that. Let me see. Because he should be in this Jordan Anderson car. And while, I mean, that's why I just like Jeb Burton more than, like, I'd rather take, honestly, I'd rather take Perkins. I'd rather take Jeb over Chastain. This is not, I don't think it's that big of a true difference. And I mean, the real difference comes from the value saving that you get yeah, sure, Chastain starts 30th, but I would just rather play Perkins and Jeb Burton over Chastain today. Um, I think I think I don't know if Jordan Anderson and his team has the ability to really give Chastain what he needs late in this race. Like, uh, I wouldn't be shocked to see Chastain running like 14th all day, right? But is he going to be able to? Are they going to be able to properly make the adjustments and chase the track that Chastain needs in his car? And then also we have weather, right? You know, um, I feel like that hurts teams that are kind of playing catch up because you probably need to prioritize track position today versus place differential. So really, my only worry on the Xfinity or yeah the Xfinity Series race is Chastain. I'd rather honestly just take anybody around him in similar equipment. See that MD is asking about Stenhouse or Nemechek in the Truck Series event. I like between these two, I prefer Nemechek, uh, but I believe they're pretty. I don't think they're drastically that different. I got Nemechek for 48.8. I got Stenhouse for 38.65. When we look at PayDirt stuff, which is my stuff, but when we look at the true, I guess rather upside of where these guys finish, that's probably the better. So let's see here. So here, let me show you what I'm doing here, right? So obviously we're in some paywalled content here. We're gonna use this as an example of how you could potentially use PayDirt, which I will say after now that we're not in like fucking Daytona and I gotta go through so many loopholes to build my lineups. The PayDirt portfolio, these optimal lineups and stuff are lineups that I am excited to that I would play, right? And how do I test that or whatever, right? Um, I hand build a good portion of my lineup, especially for a day like today, and then I go ahead and look at what optimals are being used for PayDirt, and then what lineups are being used in the portfolio manager, and I'm like, oh yeah, between my pool of that and everything, I have like 3 duplicated lineups between all those, and I hand build like 14 or whatever. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. So when we're looking at Stenhouse and stuff, obviously, these guys are the clear, kind of pivots off them. That's why I clicked on Stenhouse because I knew that they would show Nemechek and vice versa and stuff. Yet again, Nemechek should be well above those guys. But if you're really debating between Stenhouse and Nemechek, it's very likely that Caden Honeycutt or Hemrick can be more beneficial to your lineup because they boast pretty similar outcomes, and they're priced very similar. When we look at this race here, I mean, when we're looking at top fives and stuff, this is more so what I kind of focus on, right? We can see how well everybody in this looks. I'm not really what I'm more so trying to massage correctly, since I am learning kind of more outcomes and stuff. I'm more focused on the top 3, 5, 10, and 15. This is more so what I'm talking about. If I like how this stuff looks because I'm hand massaging all this stuff, I'm not really concerned about what the top percent looks like. I'm more so focused on this range here. Anyway, yet again, we're seeing why all the guys I mentioned here are looking good. When we look at the grid positions, right? Obviously, my stuff favors Kyle Busch and stuff, but you can see the drop off in this back of the field here of really like how decent they are. That's why like Mini Tyrell and Dyer like the cheapest I'd end up actually going here. But yeah, these are the things that I focus on and look at. We get an early kind of glimpse at where ownership is going. Yet again, still work in progress. But now that we're out of stupid plate race, I can eyeball it and be like, okay, that seems much more likely because it follows a pretty decent trend of how everybody should actually you know move towards or whatever, right? Yeah, so I'm very very happy about that. And you asking that question was able, or you asking that question related to Stenhouse and Nemechek, I was able to show that. So we have, I believe it's Carson, if I'm not mistaken, in the Xfinity Series race. Let me go ahead and take a gander here. Nope, it is Cody. Amazing. I don't know why I thought it was Carson. Either way, when we look at the back of Xfinity, right, and we're looking specifically at the Alpha Beta Prime cars, the DGM cars, this 30 car or whatever, I like out obviously Hill, whatever, right, and then obviously Sanchez, Clements, Poole all make sense, right? Who do I like more between Luke, Smithley, Austin Green, LeVar Scott, Balicki, Ware, Finchup, Nick Lights, right? Looking at these guys, I think I like Austin Green, Balicki, Cody Ware in that order. I think if you are down here, you are either there due to value or you are there to use that as like the one pivot to try and get different. You're playing a very chalky lineup or whatever. I think Cody Ware is very much in play. Same thing with Balicki. I don't know if the risk for LeVar Scott is really needed. He's in an Alpha Prime car, but he has very little experience. I mean, he did spin in the test at Rockingham earlier in the month. So whatever. But I do think Cody Ware is in play. I think everybody back here is pretty much in play in one way or another. I would just not be overweight on I wouldn't live or die on Smithley or Green or anybody. I do think Clements and Poole are probably your best plays from 26 on back from a value perspective. Not like obviously Sanchez testing right, but I think Clements and Poole are the two best guys there in that range. So if you are using Cody Ware, if you are using Balicki, if you are using Smithley or whatever, it is because you are actively choosing to not use Jeremy Clements or Brennan Poole in that range. I don't have anything else. Yet again, this show. I'm not trying to show a lot on the screen. We're at a very affordable rate for everything available on the website. True DFS and everything in that range was honestly more tiered towards the higher volume players and stuff. That's why we had such higher prices there. PayDirt is pretty much the opposite of that in terms of the kind of idea to grow. So right now, I mean, you get all access to all the sports for $40 on all the tools that James has made over the many years that he's had this, on top of sheets of stuff on top of the Discord, so on and so forth. Yet again, you get 50% off your first month if you use PD Welcome, so you get all this stuff for $20 your first month, right? So there's very little incentive for me to be showing stuff on screen. That's why all the stuff is pretty much behind the paywall, and why these shows are like shorter, because I'm not showing anything. I'm just going over talking about what I like and so on and so forth. So I do believe that's it. I'm really, really hoping that we don't have a triple header tomorrow. I just don't. I would not enjoy that from a DFS player, from a fucking human who has a life. Like, I would really like to not just sit at my fucking screen for 13 hours watching these guys go single file. Like, so ideally we get both races, or at least one new today, or over today. That's it. Thank you guys for being here, and I will talk with you guys later. See you. Bye bye. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.